4 sisters born into Victorian grandeur would face some of the most shocking scandals and hidden tragedies in European royal history. Victoria, Elizabeth, Irene, and Alex, daughters of Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, lived through revolutions, murders, and family secrets that remain buried in royal archives. Behind the glittering tiaras and palace walls lay forbidden affairs, mental breakdowns, mysterious childless marriages, and violent revolutionary executions that would shock even the most scandal-hardened courtiers of their era. Their father's scandalous secret marriage on the very night of Victoria's wedding would set the tone for a family plagued by whispered rumours and devastating secrets. Irene was born into scandal before she could even comprehend it. On April 30th, 1884, the very evening of Victoria's wedding to Prince Louis of Battenberg, her widowed father, Grand Duke Louis IV, committed one of the most shocking breaches of royal protocol in 19th century Europe. While Queen Victoria and assembled European royalty celebrated Victoria's marriage in the palace drawing rooms, Louis IV secretly married his mistress, Countess Alexandrine von Hutten-Czapska, a divorced Russian diplomat's wife who had been his lover for years. The scandal erupted the next morning when the secret ceremony was discovered. Queen Victoria, who had travelled to Darmstadt specifically for her granddaughter's wedding, was apoplectic with rage. The assembled Prussian crown prince and princess fled immediately to avoid being tainted by association, and the Queen threatened to cut off Louis VI's allowance unless he annulled the marriage immediately. Within 3 months, the marriage was dissolved, but not before Alexandrine had become pregnant with Louis IV's illegitimate son. Victoria's marriage to Prince Louis of Battenberg appeared stable on the surface, but their family harboured its own secrets. Her son Louis Mountbatten would later marry the scandalous Edwina Ashley, whose numerous affairs, including a legendary relationship with the West Indian cabaret singer Leslie Hutchinson, would rock the British establishment. According to explosive revelations, Edwina allegedly commissioned Cartier to create a diamond-encrusted penis sheath for Hutchinson, and was once found in such compromising circumstances with him that they required medical intervention to be separated. Victoria's role as Prince Philip's surrogate grandmother came with its own darkness. When her daughter Alice, Philip's mother, suffered a complete mental breakdown in the 1930s, Victoria witnessed the brutal forced institutionalization that tore the family apart. Alice was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and claimed to be receiving divine messages from Jesus Christ and Buddha while believing she had healing powers. Victoria had to watch as Alice was forcibly sedated and dragged away to a Swiss sanatorium against her will, missing her own daughter's weddings and leaving 10-year-old Philip effectively motherless. Declassified FBI documents from 1944 describe Victoria and Louis Mountbatten as persons of extremely low morals, alleging that both were bisexual and participated in group encounters with their respective lovers. Even more disturbing are the allegations against Louis Mountbatten himself, with FBI files suggesting he had a perversion for young boys and that Victoria may have been complicit in covering up these activities. Grand Duchess Elizabeth Feodorovna's marriage to Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich remains one of the most enigmatic relationships in Russian royal history. Despite both coming from fertile families, their 16-year marriage remained completely childless, a fact that generated malicious gossip throughout Russian society. Rumours swirled that Sergei was homosexual and that their marriage was never consummated, though Elizabeth fiercely defended her husband against such allegations. Contemporary accounts describe their relationship as strangely formal, with the couple meeting, for the most part, only at meals, and by day avoided being alone together. Though they did sleep in the same bed throughout their married life, Grand Duchess Maria, Sergei's niece, noted that Elizabeth and Sergei seemed never very intimate, adding fuel to court gossip about the true nature of their relationship. Elizabeth wielded far more political influence than historians typically acknowledge. Her opposition to Rasputin was so fierce that she was considered one of the parties involved in the plot to assassinate him. When she visited her sister Alexandra in December 1916 to plead for Rasputin's removal, she warned that Russia faced the same fate as Louis XVI, a prophecy that would prove devastatingly accurate. Elizabeth's diaries and letters mysteriously disappeared after her murder, with KGB archives noting that the sisters hid the papers. These missing documents may have contained evidence of her involvement in anti-Rasputin conspiracies and her attempts to save the monarchy through backdoor political manoeuvring. Elizabeth's execution in 1918 was more horrific than most accounts reveal. After being thrown alive into a 66-foot deep mine shaft at Alapayevsk with 7 other Romanovs, she survived the initial fall and was heard singing Orthodox hymns from the bottom of the pit. The Bolsheviks then threw grenades and burning hay into the shaft, but Elizabeth continued to live, reportedly tearing strips from her religious habit to bandage the wounds of other victims. Her final words were, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Princess Irene of Hesse and Prince Henry of Prussia earned the nickname the Very Amiables because of their seemingly pleasant, unassuming manner. However, this facade concealed deep family trauma and the constant fear of haemophilia that haunted their household. Irene passed the deadly gene to 2 of her 3 sons, watching helplessly as 4-year-old Heinrich died from a brain hemorrhage after a simple fall in 1904. The 1918 German Revolution brought shocking violence directly to Irene's door. When naval mutineers stormed Kiel, Irene and Heinrich were forced to flee under gunfire in their automobile. During their escape, Irene was shot in the arm by revolutionary forces, barely escaping with her life. This traumatic event, combined with learning of her sister's murders in Russia, left Irene psychologically scarred. In the 1920s, Irene became embroiled in one of the most famous royal imposter cases in history when Anna Anderson claimed to be the surviving Grand Duchess Anastasia. Desperate for any surviving family member, Irene initially hoped Anderson might be genuine, but upon meeting her, immediately recognized the deception. The emotional trauma of this encounter was so severe that her husband banned Anderson's name from being mentioned in Irene's presence. Years later, when her son tested Anderson with childhood questions, the imposter's satisfactory answers briefly rekindled hope. But DNA evidence would eventually prove Anderson was a Polish factory worker with no royal connections. Princess Alex of Hesse's transformation into Alexandra Feodorovna began with deep personal conflict. Her initial refusal to convert from Lutheranism to Russian Orthodoxy caused a major diplomatic crisis, with Queen Victoria personally opposing the match to Nicholas II. When she finally agreed to marry, it was against her grandmother's wishes and her own religious convictions, setting the stage for a troubled reign. The birth of haemophiliac Tsarevich Alexei in 1904 created a devastating family secret that would ultimately destroy the Romanov dynasty. Alexandra's desperation to save her son led her into the arms of Grigory Rasputin, whose hold over the imperial family generated scandalous rumors throughout Russian society. Police reports described a drunken Rasputin exposing himself in a Moscow restaurant while bragging that Nicholas gave him sexual access to Alexandra, though she dismissed these accounts as malicious gossip. Alexandra's struggles to produce a male heir were marked by devastating personal tragedies that became fodder for court gossip. After suffering a miscarriage during her coronation stress in 1896, malicious rumors spread that the lost baby was the product of an affair and that she had deliberately aborted it to prevent scandal. In 1902, she experienced a molar pregnancy, producing what was officially described as a miscarriage, but was actually a large fleshy mass, resulting from a fertilized egg that died in the 4th week of gestation. Before Rasputin, Alexandra and Nicholas consulted the French mystic Philippe Nizier-Vachaud, who claimed he could use magnetic powers to change an unborn baby's sex from female to male. After Philippe's methods failed spectacularly, the imperial couple turned to the canonized Seraphim of Sarov, bathing in springs where the saint had once prayed. Whether by coincidence or divine intervention, Alexandra conceived Alexei shortly afterward, only to discover the child carried the haemophilia gene. During World War I, Alexandra faced devastating accusations of treason due to her German heritage. Rumours spread throughout Russia that she was hiding her brother, Grand Duke Ernst Ludwig of Hesse, in the Alexander Palace and conducting nightly conversations with Kaiser Wilhelm II to feed military secrets to Germany. Though these allegations were false, Alexandra actually despised the Kaiser, calling him nothing but a clown. The damage to her reputation was irreversible. When Nicholas II departed for the military front in 1915, Alexandra became regent and made disastrous political decisions under Rasputin's influence. In just 16 months, she appointed 4 prime ministers, 5 ministers of interior, and 3 ministers of war, creating governmental chaos that accelerated the monarchy's collapse. Her sisters Elizabeth and Victoria Melita attempted to intervene, begging her to banish Rasputin, but Alexandra refused to listen. The execution of the imperial family on July 17, 1918, was more brutal than official accounts reveal. Alexandra watched her husband shot before her eyes, then was killed by a bullet to the head as she tried to make the sign of the cross. The Bolshevik executioners bayoneted and shot the family multiple times, with some of the children surviving the initial volley due to jewels sewn into their clothing. The bodies were then soaked in acid and gasoline, burned and buried in unmarked graves. The 4 daughters of Princess Alice embodied the twilight of European monarchy. Victoria's survival through family scandals and political transformation. Elizabeth's martyrdom amid political conspiracy. Irene's endurance through revolutionary violence, and Alex's destruction by impossible circumstances and family curses. Their lives reveal that behind the golden facade of royal privilege lay very human struggles with mental illness, infertility, political intrigue, forbidden love, and ultimately, violent death. These sisters witnessed the collapse of the old order and paid the ultimate price for their royal blood. Their stories remind us that even those born to rule face the same fundamental human challenges of love, loss, and mortality, but with the added burden of public scrutiny and the weight of dynastic expectations that would ultimately prove too heavy to bear.